We are the Asian Network for Free Elections or ANFREL. At ako po si Briza Rosales, ang Executive Director of ANFREL. And with me is Mr. Rohana, our Head of Mission, and we'll be sharing our Election Day observations, findings, and election recommendations.
Thank you, Briza. Good morning, everyone. The Asian Network of Free Elections, ANFREL, congratulate the Filipino people for their unwavering determinations and mass participations to uphold the democracy through the conduct of 2025 national and local elections, despite the operational challenges and a climate of political uncertainty. Uh, Also, ANFREL wish to acknowledge the valuable contributions of domestic elections observers group, including PPCRV, LINTE, NANFREL, as well as the media, poll workers, and other civil society organizations in promoting an inclusive and transparent electoral process. Furthermore, ANFREL commends the Commission of Elections, COMELEC, for its effort to improve transparency and ensure more consultative and participatory administrations of the entire electoral process.
And yeah, and actually it is more than a routine process because these elections were a demonstration of the people's continued insistence on accountable governance. Because as the Philippines will embark and prepare for the first Bangsamoro parliamentary elections in October and the Bangsamoro and the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections in December, of course, the lessons and the momentum from this election must be carried forward to strengthen democratic institutions and safeguard electoral integrity. So yesterday, May 12, ANFREL deployed 21 observers, long-term and short-term, and they were deployed to monitor the polls across 270 polling precincts in 11 regions in the Philippines. And this included 75 polling precincts in the National Capital Region, and with the remainder spread across the provinces nationwide. So of course, ANFREL observers follow closely the entire election day processes, including the opening of polls at 5 o'clock during the early voting hours to better accommodate the senior citizens, persons with disability, and pregnant women voters, as well as voting procedures throughout the day and the closing and voting transmission process. Of course, all of the observers, including the electoral analysts, the mission management team, we were all accredited by the Commission on Elections. And of course, we adhere to the Declaration of Principles for International Election Observation, the Declaration of Global Principles for Non-Partisan Election Observation, the Model Commitments for Advancing Genuine and Credible Elections, and of course, it's our ANFREL Code of Conduct. And this adherence guaranteed high standards of impartiality, objectivity, transparency throughout the mission. And for these midterm elections, of course, we seen the important innovations and reforms by COMELEC, expanding access and promoting inclusivity, which reflects commitments to universal suffrage, inclusive and informed participation, and administrative inclusiveness. We've seen the implementation of the priority polling places, the satellite priority polling places in the National Capital Region, the APPs or accessible polling places, which were exclusive for the senior citizens and persons with disabilities, and of course the voting centers and other polling places for the indigenous peoples and persons deprived of liberty. Of course, we've seen that and was made available during the early voting hours, which were implemented from 5 to 7 a.m. And they were implemented to accommodate those respected vulnerable voters. But of course, in the most observed areas, polling precincts opened at night, with electoral boards carrying out all of the essential opening procedures, including breaking machine seals and inspecting storage compartments in the presence of watchers and voters. And the electoral board members were generally observed adhering to the voting protocols and providing effective assistance to voters. And meanwhile, voting centers located in the malls, because there are mall voting initiatives also for these elections. ANFREL found it generally well organized, featuring comfortable waiting areas, clear directional signages, and improved accessibility for vulnerable voters. We've seen that the use of privacy screens in voting booths helped enhance ballot secrecy, even in areas with limited space. Domestic observers, generally citizens' arms and poll watchers, were permitted to observe from designated areas within the polling precincts, and us as ANFREL as international observers were likewise granted access to the premises of the voting centers, and we were allowed to enter the polling precincts to observe the closing procedures and witness the printing and transmission of election returns. But of course, despite the overall smooth administration of the election day, ANFREL observers identified a number of challenges that warrant attention to strengthen electoral integrity and public trust. Number one is crowd management and the priority polling place implementation. Because in several areas, including the large number of voting voters in Metro Manila and Cotabato City, we've seen PPPs experience long queues and disorganization. So vulnerable voters arrived early but found limited support or unclear instructions because in some instances, confusion arose about who will be the allowed assistors, and vulnerable voters were redirected to regular polling places. But this highlights also the need to improve voter information dissemination and polling station logistics. And at the same time, based on our interviews while we were observing yesterday, some voters expressed confusion, believing that the PPP was their only available option. And this highlights the need for clearer voter information and guidance on accessible voting arrangements. Second, with regard to voting environment and secrecy of the ballot, um, the physical layout of many school-based polling precincts raised concerns about ballot secrecy, with voters often positioned too closely together and verification screens visible to electoral board members and poll watchers. And in some instances, EB staff fed the ballots into the machines on behalf of the voters, so it limits the opportunity for voters to verify their selections. But of course, while these practices were not uniformly problematic, they underscore the need for stricter adherence to standards that protect the secrecy and the integrity of the vote. But at the same time, of course, ANFREL comments instances where EB members maintained respectful distance and supported voters without compromising the ballot secrecy, which, of course, the good practices that should be institutionalized. Number three is with regard to automated counting machine technical issues. Despite, of course, the generally smooth conduct of the election in majority of the voting centers that we have observed, the most common problem involves sensitive scanners and some rejected ballots. Because in these instances, EB had to temporarily pause operations to clean the scanner, resulting in delays and long queues. And other technical problems included ink smudges affecting scanner performance, malfunctioning papers, cutters, and paper channels. But of course, most of the issues that we've mentioned, they were promptly addressed by on-site technicians. The disruptions contributed, of course, to voter frustration and increased pressure to the electoral board members. Our observers also noted the inconsistent implementation of the ballot verification timing protocol because the prescribed 15-second display for the front side of the ballot and 5 seconds for the back was not uniformly followed. Additionally, in most of the voting centers observed, electoral board members during the closing procedures were not able to perform the ballot review, verification review, wherein they will be scanning the QR code in the VVPAT or the receipt. So it was an added transparency measure introduced with the new ACMs. But as a result, as we have observed, this verification layer remained largely underutilized. Fourth, with regard to delay in the opening of polls, we seen this in a small number of polling stations, particularly in Cotabato City. And we have seen experienced significant delays in opening due to late dispatch of election materials. Number five, limited announcement and polling precinct management, because in many cases, as we have observed in the 270 polling precincts, EB did not audibly announce procedures, and there was no clear indication of the transition between early voting hours, transitioning to regular voting periods. So this contributed to voter confusion and inconsistent implementation of the early voting policies. We have noted also the absence of clear communication and adequate signage, which hindered voter flow and crowd control, especially in large voting centers in the National Capital Region, where ineffective precinct management resulted in long queues, extended waiting times, and growing frustration among voters, placing additional pressure again to the electoral board staff. And in several locations, ANFREL also observed election offenses, including instances of unlawful electioneering, those campaigning outside the voting center, unauthorized entry of some policemen into polling precincts, and the presence of illegal assistors. And some we have seen and noticed that some of whom were domestic observers and poll watchers who were seen providing assistance to voters during the voting processes. And right now, of course, preliminary observations indicated the transmission of election results generally proceeded in a transparent manner, but it currently experiences notable delays in some of the servers. But of course, ANFREL emphasizes the need for continued monitoring and transparency in both transmission and canvassing processes to uphold public confidence in the electoral outcome. Of course, as the country prepares for the Bangsamoro and BSKE elections later this year, um, we will continue, of course, to maintain our observation. We are still here until the 17th of May, and we will be observing the random manual audit and the canvassing procedures, of course, which serves as a vital transparency safeguard. So, for the preparation of the October and December elections this year, of course, ANFREL um, calls upon the COMELEC to build upon the lessons from this election and further align its processes with international commitments to electoral integrity, ensuring genuine elections, a sound legal framework, accountable administration, transparent and timely transmission and canvassing of results, and informed participation. So ANFREL also encourages to, of course, address those procedural inconsistencies, improve voter information dissemination, and logistical planning on election day. At this point, of course, as we release our election day statement, we are encouraging everyone to download it from our website. And we are inviting everyone during our press conference on the 16th of May at Diamond Hotel Manila at 9 o'clock. So we will be releasing our interim report and at the same time a final report to follow on July 2025. So the interim report will present our initial findings on the legal and political context, the campaign environment, and the issues surrounding the overall electoral processes, such as the issues on campaign finance, abuse of state resources in elections, media access, and election day procedures. So, of course, the interim statement also will also include early recommendations to inform the upcoming electoral processes in October and December. So with this mission, ANFREL reaffirms its commitment to supporting the democratic aspirations of the Filipino people and advancing electoral transparency inclusivity, and integrity. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the 16th.